This video is brought to you by Captivating History. Historian Will Durant calls the Minoans the first link in the European chain. Who were these people, and how did they come to attract so much attention in recent times? The interesting thing about the Minoan civilization is that it was rediscovered in the 20th century and was named after the mythical King Minos. The Minoans continued to be an intriguing subject for modern audiences because our understanding of them forms an incomplete puzzle. Studies have presented some rough ideas about what the civilization might have looked like. Still, the Minoans are nothing short of an intriguing mystery for archaeologists, historians, scholars, tourists, fans of mythology, and students of the ancient world. The Minoans were an ancient civilization of the Bronze Age that built their settlements on islands in the Aegean Sea. They lived around 5,000 years ago and have left behind some traces of their existence. Ever since the excavations conducted by Sir Arthur Evans, a British archaeologist who found the first Minoan ruins, the civilization has continued to garner interest. Through studying material culture, we know quite a bit about artistic techniques, favorite subjects, fashion, daily life, gender roles, and who the Minoans traded with. However, much remains a mystery. Who were their enemies? Did they go to war with their neighbors? Did they have great monarchs and nobles? Who was the snake goddess in their sculptures? Did they really practice human sacrifice? Were women the true rulers of religion? What on earth was bull leaping? Perhaps most importantly, which catastrophes weakened the civilization enough to be overrun by their militaristic neighbors on mainland Greece? Well, let's get into what we do know about them. Homer, the ancient Greek poet, claims that the Minoans built 90 settlements on the island of Crete and numerous towns on the small islands nearby. Archaeological work backs this statement up to some extent, as concrete evidence of the Minoan civilization has been found on Crete and a nearby cluster of islands formerly known as Thera, which is now called Santorini. So we know that they lived on islands like Crete and other landmasses on the Aegean Sea from 2700 to 1100 BCE. They were seafaring people who built their settlements on a series of small islands near modern-day Greece, and evidence suggests that they traveled across the entirety of the Mediterranean. As a civilization of the Bronze Age, they would have possessed some form of writing and an urban population. To create bronze, the Minoans would have been able to smelt copper and alloy with other metals like tin and components like arsenic. At Crete, large sites like Knossos, which scholars believe was the civilization's capital, show that the Minoan population grew rapidly from approximately 2,000 in 2500 BCE to 18,000 in 2000 BCE. Growth continued to between 20,000 and 100,000 in 1600 BCE, and by 1360 BCE, its population was above 30,000. Besides Knossos, the most important Minoan sites include Phaistos, Aegia Triada, Vasiliki, Arca Lahori, and Akrotiri. The people from these areas interacted and traded with the Egyptians, the civilizations on mainland Greece, the societies of the Levant, the people of Anatolia, and potentially Eastern European civilizations like contemporary Romania. As ardent seafarers, they spent most of their lives traveling, fishing, and trading on the water. Since before classical antiquity, the Mediterranean has been a dense hub of cultural and economic activity. For over 130,000 years, humans have inhabited the Mediterranean region, which makes scientists speculate that the first hominins arrived at places like Crete. Archaeological evidence, like stone tools, pottery, and skeletons discovered around the island, indicate that the evolution of modern humans took place around 10,000 to 12,000 BCE. The Minoans and the Greeks probably shared common ancestors that originated in Anatolia or the Levant. Since the chronology of the Minoans is a little perplexing, people have divided it into three periods: the early Minoans, the middle period, and the late Minoans. The first vestiges of the Minoan civilization that developed around the early Bronze Age lasted from 3500 to 2100 BCE. Authors point out that this era demonstrates the potential for future growth. Still, it was not until the late 3000s BCE that the hominids first started to form urban centers. These centers usually kissed the coastline to facilitate their voyages. Here, the elites could flock to engage in commerce and generate a semblance of a rudimentary social structure. The earliest Minoan temples also date back to this era. The middle period of the Minoan civilization lasted from 2100 to 1600 BCE. It is marked by exponential growth in population, as well as technological and artistic developments that would render their trade with the Mediterranean relatively easy and efficient. During the latter years of this epoch, something happened that caused widespread destruction on Crete. Palaces across the island were destroyed. This disturbance may have been caused by a massive earthquake that potentially followed a volcanic disruption. There is also some speculation that the area suffered an invasion from Anatolia. Still, even if such a thing did happen, there is little remaining evidence of armed combat. The late Minoan era also suffered a natural catastrophe. A volcano in Thera erupted, and although the eruption was not as destructive, the force generated by the underground explosion manifested itself in different ways. A massive tsunami struck most of the surrounding islands, including Crete. The Minoan architecture turned to rubble, and settlements and palaces had to be rebuilt. Consequently, another natural disaster would hamper their ability to rest on their laurels. Around 1450 BCE, there is evidence that an earthquake destroyed multiple palaces and laid waste to the settlements of Malea and Phaistos. This earthquake probably followed another volcano eruption at Thera and was instrumental in the downfall of the Minoan civilization. The reasons for this are still obscure. Knossos was still standing, and as such, the Minoans still had their center of culture and trade. They could still influence other regions in the Aegean and the Mediterranean Sea. However, they were also severely weakened. The decline was slow yet steady. Scholars believe that this weakness led to them being overrun by Mycenaeans on mainland Greece. The existence of Mycenaean artifacts after the time of the Minoans suggests that the Mycenaeans most likely moved in and took over. The Mycenaeans were not that different from the Minoans, except their lifestyle was more oriented towards living on the mainland. As such, they needed a robust military presence. The Mycenaeans were similar to the Minoans in that they relied on trade as well, just not to the same extent. The Mycenaean Greeks were the last Bronze Age group in the Aegean Sea. They rose to prominence around 1600 BCE, lasting about 500 years until 1100 BCE. This fall coincided with the fall of several other civilizations during the Bronze Age collapse. People tend to mix up the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. Still, despite their similarities, there were significant differences between the two. The Minoans relied on trade and craftsmanship to rise to power, whereas the Mycenaeans scrapped their way through the Aegean and the Mediterranean. The latter's economy was not mercantile, so they relied on conquest for valuable goods. The Minoans shared some characteristics with other ancient civilizations. They had different socioeconomic classes, with the king occupying the highest position. Below him, there were priests, priestesses, and administrators. Since the Minoans gained ample exposure to other civilizations like the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, and so on through their trade, they were most likely influenced by their social structures as well. However, they were decidedly unusual for their time, especially in terms of gender representation. Across human history, a common trend that can be observed is that gender equality in civilizations fades as they move towards an urban way of life. This was not the case with the Minoans, and men and women possessed similar rights and roles. Artistic depictions often show women in a position of authority. Several pictures show women seated above men, and no existing ones show men seated above women. The Minoan women had more rights, opportunities, and freedoms than their counterparts in similar cultures, like the Mycenaeans and the ancient Greeks. They could become craftswomen and hold important and authoritative positions. On the other hand, men could be soldiers, craftsmen, farmers, traders, laborers, nobles, and priests. The divide between socioeconomic classes made upward mobility somewhat limited, but ambitious men could still work their way upwards. The Minoans traded for products they did not have access to or could not develop locally, like advanced weaponry, new textiles, and even cats from Egypt. The Minoan diet consisted of a wide variety of seafood and products taken from the Mediterranean. In their heyday, historians believe that the Minoans and the Mycenaeans did have a peaceful relationship. It was not until the latter era that the Mycenaeans started taking over the trade routes. Like most ancient peoples, the Minoans mastered animal domestication and appeared to own sheep, cattle, goats, and some pigs. These animals wouldn't have been eaten all the time. While most contemporary societies use domesticated animals as a primary source of meat, the Minoans would have needed the animals to provide usable resources like wool and milk. Goat milk was more popular than that of cows, and sheep were needed for the wool to make clothes. Pigs seemed to be one of the only large animals whose purpose was solely for food. Arthur Evans, the archaeologist responsible for discovering some of the most essential Minoan deposits, claimed that the civilization was very peaceful. Many modern scholars disagree with the idealist vision of Evans, but the fact remains that there was no concrete evidence of a legitimate Minoan army or even warfare. As a thalassocracy, the Minoan civilization relied on its naval fleet instead of a land army to ensure general safety. Their ships were reinforced and featured modifications and weapons to keep pirates at bay. Shipbuilders created longboats using wood and bronze tools, roughly 115 feet long and 20 feet wide. However, these additions to the ships were rarely used, giving a little bit of credence to Evans's claims of Pax Minoica, or Minoan peace. The Minoans were primarily known for two goods, tin and saffron. Tin was always in demand during the Bronze Age, and merchants would take it to Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia. The Minoans had multiple writing scripts, as shown by the evidence in Crete and Santorini, but most of them are undeciphered. Their earliest written scripts are called the Cretan hieroglyphs. Their origin is debated. After the Cretan hieroglyphs, the two most well-known scripts were Linear A and Linear B. Linear A was the parent script, and Linear B would be adopted by the Mycenaeans. The latter resembles earlier forms of the Greek language. Writing scripts was not the only influence of the Minoans, since they may have been the Greeks' predecessors in terms of religion. Archaeologists believe that a snake goddess was the most significant deity in the Minoan culture, thinking that the Greeks co-opted her and depicted her as Ariadne, the daughter of the famous King Minos, from whom Minoans take their name. The Minoans made frescoes, pottery, and jewelry. One of the recurring themes in these artworks is the depiction of bull leaping. Whether the activity had any ceremonial, religious, or cultic significance is unknown. Another activity that the Minoans may or may not have engaged in is human sacrifice. In addition to their palaces and columns, they also had intricate plumbing systems to facilitate waste management. Scholars remain divided on just how influential the Minoans were on the Mycenaeans and the Greeks when it comes to religion. Not much of them remain, but they were influential in providing the framework for the Greek mythos. One may ask, well, where are they now? A perfectly justified question. George Stamotoyanopoulos from the University of Washington answers it in the following words. We now know that the founders of the first advanced European civilizations were European. They were very similar to Neolithic Europeans and very similar to present-day Cretans. It may be hard to understand why the Minoans were so important. Still, the fact that they heavily influenced the Mycenaeans, who in turn influenced the ancient Greeks, one of the most influential civilizations in the history of humanity, serves as the answer. To learn more about the Minoans, check out our book, Minoans, a captivating guide to an essential Bronze Age society in ancient Greece called the Minoan civilization. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while they're still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.